This lecture has been made available to you courtesy of the American Numismatic Society.
It's been said before, but Clive Stannard needs no introduction whatsoever to this crowd. We've heard about his research and its centrality to how we think of all of these coinages throughout this conference. But I would say, in summary, that his work shows the deep interconnections between Campania, Iberia, Southern Gaul, the islands. But beyond the recent work at the Liri River and in Pompei, he also has done serious work on mint production, including how the Roman mint probably operated in batches, controlling through the gouging of coins, and also, as we had just discussed 2 papers ago, mechanical die reproduction in the ancient world and the feasibility of that. So I will take up no more of his time, and I will turn the floor over to him.
Thank you, Liv. Can you hear me properly?
Perfect.
Okay, I'll share my screen. Okay, Rick was the first collector to understand that the many strange things I was discovering about minor coinages in central Italy could be seen as a whole. One of his central interests was the numismatic impact of Rome on other cultures and the history that could be drawn from understanding this. He immediately opened a space in his mind for the non-state minor coinages of central Italy. I'm going to present a brief picture of how this monetary history unfolded. I'll need to go fast. My main message is that these non-state coinages should be seen in the round as responses to what I have called the crisis of small change that began about the middle of the 2nd century. Crawford, of course, gathered together what he thought of as imitations of Roman coinage in 1982. His understanding, however, could only be partial, because until I marshaled the evidence of the crisis of small change and showed that the response went beyond mere reproduction, imitation of Roman coin, he could not see the wood for the trees. My focus is on 3 places that I know well: Rome and Latium, Minturnae on the Latium-Campanian border, and Pompeii. The way the monetary stock in Minturnae evolved is a good place to start. The Samnite War between 342 and 290 drew Rome south over the river Liris, which was the border between Latium and Campania. In 326, the Greeks of Neapolis allied with Rome to rid themselves of their Samnite occupiers, and this alliance became the cornerstone of Roman control of the region, bolstered by other alliances, including with Pompei. Rome planted colonies in strategic places, including the Colonia Maritima of Minturnae in 296-295. It was in a strategic position because the Via Appia, constructed in 312, crossed the Liris from Latium to Campania at this point. A bridge was built about the middle of the 3rd century. It was a safe and commodious harbour and a key to Roman naval and military intervention in Campania. Much of my work derives from having built up the extensive Liri database of non-Roman coins from the river at Minturnae. People seem to have tossed the coins into the river from the bridge. Hundreds of thousands of these were taken out by clandestine divers and dispersed in trade, and I've tried to trace and record the non-Roman coins. As you see here, this provides a very large sample of coins from most of the Greco-Roman world. In it, I found 3 previously unknown complexes: non-state bronze coinages from central Italy, local Minturnian small change, and Minturnian struck lead pieces. Although the database does not include Roman coins, we have a good sample from the underwater investigations by Brother Dominic Roeg, an underwater monk. Together, these show two things clearly. Roman coin did not arrive in any number before the Second Punic War. Only 4 of 380 coins are earlier. And Minturnae, like most of Campania, most of the time used Neapolitan coin in ordinary life. Rome did not supply bronze coins to its colonies or allies. It took no interest in and did not regulate their minor coinages. The same is true for Pompei before the Second Punic War, as can be seen from a votive deposit of Neapolitan coins at the time of the war from the Platea in front of the Temple of Jupiter in the Forum. We now know that an official Roman emission, Trientes, Quadrantes, and Sextantes, was struck at Minturnae during the war, mostly on fresh lands, but also on Neapolis, Rome itself, Syracuse, and Carthage, including pieces that must have been booty from Scipio's invasion of Africa. I therefore think the emission dates to that time about 24 to 201. To distinguish it clearly, I propose citing this emission as ROC 56N. We need to break out 56. So Minturnae ended the war with a fresh supply of small change. Pompei, on the other hand, continued to rely on its wasting stock of Neapolitan bronze, and very few Roman coins reached it. The single most important factor behind the crisis of small change was Rome's disinterest in creating a stable and adequate supply of bronze small change, while silver coinage grew enormously. Rome's victory led into a period of rapid military expansion. Successful wars drained the wealth of the Mediterranean towards Italy, creating a boom in monetary liquidity and economic activity, not only in Rome, but also in its allies, whose soldiers provided a large part of its army. Between 201 and 152, Rome received 1,050 tons of silver in indemnities and booties, and then you must add the silver from the mines in Spain, etc., etc. At the same time, trade in the Western Mediterranean exploded, with Spain in metals, particularly silver and lead, and with Massilia, Gaul, and Spain in wine and agricultural commodities. Much of the trade was in the hands of Campanians and of Minturnae. The reason for the mix of metals struck during the centralization of coin production at Rome following the war are opaque. After a period of 2 metal issues, silver predominates between 179 and 170, but there's a radical shift between 169 and 158. Almost all emissions are now bronze only, with acids struck in large numbers and many divisional pieces. After 157, the army is paid in silver, but bronze still continues to be struck in similar values between 157 and 146 when production of the as stops abruptly. Most emissions, however, are now silver only or in the 2 metals. There is no substantial annual production of bronze again until 91. We can get a rough idea of the denominational structure of the coinage from Barfeld's manuscript in Berlin that catalogues the weights of 86 signed emissions from 62 important collections, beginning with ROC 147 of 189 to 180 BC. In the left column, I give the size of the sample, N, the number of emissions that Barfeld listed, E, and calculate from this the number of coins per emission, N over E. Here you see the massive production of asses, down to 146. When the massive ass production stops, the quadrantes becomes the commonest denomination. Emissions are smaller, both in number of coins and of overall value. The ass returns briefly, with smaller denominations, about 112. There is a gap in production between about 96 and 92 or 91. And from 91 to 84, we have a substantial production of bronze on a Samuntial standard, but these pieces, for reasons that are unclear, seem to disappear rapidly from circulation. There's a small issue of asses by Sulla in 82, and then the bronze coinage stops. Here are Hopkin and Kay's attempts to estimate the production of silver denarii. Without entering into details, I want to stress the enormous growth in the silver monetary supply. This was the metal in which wealth spread around West Central Italy. The production of bronze coin does not keep pace with silver production. In terms of both numbers and overall value, the bronze stock stagnated and may even have shrunk because of low recruitment and attrition. The upshot is a crisis in the supply of small change and the non-state coinages. Let's look first at Upper Latium, in which I do not include Minturnae. One way to find small change was to import blocks of foreign coins. The first seems to have been brought from Kos, probably about 140, 130. This is the cone coin in question. The block may have come to Rome itself. Many of these were then overstruck with quasi-Roman types, particularly the Faustulus wolf and twins reverse of a denarius of about 137. Outside Kos, the overstruck coin is rare. Of nearly 13,000 bronze coins from the Athena Agora excavations, only 4 Cohen, all of this issue. But I know 96 unmodified and 13 overstruck coins from central Italy. The Overstrikes used 8 obverse and 8 reverse dies. At 5,000 to 20,000 coins per obverse dies, between 40,000 and 160,000 coins would have been overstruck. If we assume the same survival rate for unmodified and for overstruck coins, the unoverstruck coins would have been 96 to 13 times more numerous, adding between 295,000 and 1,182,000 more coins for a total of between 335,000 and 1,342,000 coins. These are, of course, only hypothetical figures, but they give us an idea of the magnitude of this block. The second probable block of small coins came to Latium from Kyrenaica in the 1st century. Ptolemy Appian left his kingdom to Rome in 96. The Kyrenaican coins may have come slightly later because the Senate doesn't seem to have concerned itself with Kyrenaica until the mid-70s. Most of this coin, with an obverse head of Ammon and a reverse head of Isis, a reverse headdress of Isis, they date from Ptolemy to Sota to Ptolemy Appian, so 115 to 96 BC. I'm not certain where this block went to in Latium. Here are 9 overstrikes. 6 are from the river Liri, 3 from museums. Marta Barbato has found 2 more in the coins of Roman Sottosuolo Urbano materials in the Capitoline Museum. I know 107 unmodified coins of the Kyrenaican undertype from Rome, the river Liri, Pompei, and the votive deposit at Gragnano. At 5 to 20,000 coins per obverse dies, I calculate between 390,000 and 1,550,000 coins could have been imported. Suzanne Frey Cooper and I coined the term pseudomint to denote an unusual phenomenon among the non-state coinages of central Italy. Informal mints that systematically imitate and mix the types of a number of state mints. This reoccurred a number of times in Campania and in Latium in the 2nd and 1st centuries, which is why a specific term is useful. It makes possible a wider discussion of the nature of such mints and what they tell us about the society and the economy of the time. In Latium, a number of pseudomints were active in the middle of the 1st century. Federico and I described them in 2013, and I am working on a revision. These are images from that revision. On the left is the die chain that mules the types of pestum with those of panormus. The die chain mules Roman types with those of Sicily and others. That's Minturnae in Sicily, a small mint. Here we see imitation of a datable coin of Tetmesos in Pisidia. It's the first year of the series, 70 BC. The types are milled with Rome and with the Phonacator of the Italo-Betican series, which I'll talk about next. The Italo-Betican issues stand out because they use a set of images found nowhere else. These images relate to the Roman bath, but associated with them are other issues that do not use these types. I do not think that these are merely bath tokens or the like, but that they reflect the cultic allegiance of an unidentified Roman social and political group involved in the trade with southern Hispania through the port of Minturnae. One of the images is the toilet set of 2 strigils and a reblos of oil, which you see here. A lead piece from Minturnae, which is below it, seems to show this in a cultic context. Apollo proffers the strigils and erybalos like a ritual object to a worshipper, to the small male figure standing on an altar, who holds out another set to Apollo. Apollo is not usually linked to baths, but here the strigils and erybalos is semantically crucial and probably an attribute of Apollo in a cultic context. In Italy, we have the fixed icon of a little dog carrying the strigils and erybalos in his mouth. This Calenian black glass tondo is from Gruviscia, a port of Tarquinia. The Furnacator, a stoker of hypocausts, is another diagnostic image, sometimes found on bath mosaics. He carries a shovel and often has a huge phallus. So does the bath attendant, seen here with the strigils and erybalos from Pompei. The Phonacator and the bath attendant are icons, not simple descriptive types, because no one in his right mind feeds hypocausts while encumbered with an unwieldy great phallus. The images seem to have borrowed some attributes of Italic theatre, in particular the phallus, as we can see on the South Italic bell crater of 400 to 380 BC. Let me look briefly at some aspects of the Italian complex in Upper Latium. The panther is the key, because it is by far the largest issue and can be dated. The output of these pieces, perhaps 1.3 to 2.6 million coins, if asses, would equate to between 80 and 160,000 denarii, or between a sixth to a third of a legion's annual pay. And it is possible that the issue was intended to support Roman or allied soldiers in buying provisions and would have circulated through the army back to the market and then back to the soldiers. If so, the nature of the institution for which we are looking would mix a political role with an economic role. Because of the new information I'll show later regarding the Spanish plomos that were made in Cordoba under the control of the optimates, I wonder if this could be a pro-Sullan issue at the time of his return from the East in 82. Many of the other issues can be organized around the panther. Here are some panthers that Rick left to the ANS. One large group of the Italian complex is of coins that Barfeld isolated and gave to Roman mints in Sicily in 1904. Many are on triangular flans. Many are signed by members of the ANIA using this characteristic ligate AN. The only case where the strigils and erybalos appears on Roman coinage is this quadrans of 137 BC. At about the same time as these lead pieces from Minturnae, along with the diagnostic type Vulcan and the bath attendant and strigils and erybalos were lost in the Isola Pedrosa shipwreck in Catalonia. Here's the Phonacator, and here's the dog with the strigils. I illustrate these coins to show the triangular fabric that characterizes many of the Italo-Betican issues. Note that they lack any diagnostic types. There are also overstrikes on simultial asses, with the forepart of a lion on the one side and the bath attendant on the other. A fraction of these is overstruck over the Cyrenaican import. And there's a late Italo-Betican piece struck over one of these. So it's an overstrike over an overstrike. The issues of the Annia last for 50 to 70 years, and a number of persons sign, almost always with the legate AN. Here I organize them according to whether they come before or after the Panther. Overall, the Italo-Betican types are used for perhaps 80 to 100 years. It's a very consistent and large-scale phenomenon. The crisis of small change resulted in issues that I can't associate with the Italo-Betican complex, though some may belong to it. Many are overstruck, mainly on quadrantes. It's often difficult to know what is Italo-Betican and what's simply informal. Here's an issue on quadrantes with a Faustilis type. I think it's informal. This issue with Hercules and Antaius is also probably informal. But this issue splits the Faustilis types between the two sides of the coins. Because of the triangular flan, I class it as Italo-Betican. Like other Italo-Betican issues of the 80s, it seems to have undergone a change in size. The only other overstruck foreign coins I know from the first century are on the Volcae Aricomici. These coins make up about 0.5% of the foreign coins in the Liri. Here's a probable overstrike on an Italo-Betican coin showing the bath attendant's brocas. A large number of foreign coins were present in central Italy because of military and commercial expansion, and I have no doubt that many of these were simply pressed into service. In Rome, 31.2% of the Sottosuolo Urbano bronze coins of Republican times that Marta has studied are foreign, as were 12.5% of the coins from the river at Minturnae. At Pompei, 12.9% of the coins from below the 79 level are foreign, when coins of the Ebusan block that I will describe later are discounted. The more difficult question is whether there was large-scale imitation of Republican coins accurate enough to escape immediate detection. The recent paper by Schaefer and Andrew McCabe suggests that they may have been, but I'm not certain. They argue that pieces like those in figure 12 and 13 imitate the original in figure 8 in numbers so large as to swamp the original. To evaluate this, we would need to ask who could have made them, when and why. Such massive and accurate copying of a single official issue cannot be sporadic, but would need organization. If imitations, was this an isolated episode or part of a more general phenomenon? We have as yet no other sure examples of issues imitated in a similar way by which we might hope to gauge this. They date the imitation to 206 to 195, which is much earlier than any of the non-state coinages I discuss here, and well before the crisis of small change, which means they would need to be described in another way. Here you have a synoptic picture of the major elements of the non-state coinages of Latium from the mid-2nd to the mid-1st century BC. The Italo-Betican issues in Spain are obviously part of the same phenomenon as in Italy, and I think I now have a better understanding of them. There is ample evidence for contacts between central Italy and Spain, particularly Betica. Betica is the later name of the province. At this stage, this was Hispania Ulterior, where panthers have been found, and with Minturnae, with finds of Betican lead pieces. The Isola Pedrosa shipwreck, which you can see there, contained lead pieces of about the mid-130s BC from Minturnae with Italo-Betican forms, so we know that the this was already going at that stage. In Betica, the plomos concentrate around Cordoba, in the area of the Sierra Morena, mined by large-scale anonymous societates. The key questions are, who made the lead plomos and why, and what is their relationship, if any, to the mines? The red dots are finds of plomos. Here is a lead tessera from one of the mining societies from the river at Minturnae. It probably comes from the Societatis Castellinensis. Contacts were obviously close. The plomos use the Italo-Betican types, here the stridules and the aribolos, and the phonacator, I should say. The phonacator has until now caused confusion because the shovel he carries led to him being thought a miner, and that the plomos were used on the mines. In fact, most of the images on the plomos relate to agriculture, here wine. Here we see the inscription PS. More Italo-Betican types. Vulcan, the stridules carried by the little man, and the phonacator, hugely cephalic. In a paper in the next Numismatic Chronicle, Alejandro Sinner, Bartolome Mora, Gianluca Grigori, and I have looked at the mining Societatis. Here is a new lead seal from Posadas near Cordoba, which shows that the city itself directly exploited at least one mine. The object in the middle is yet another lead seal, again new, from Posadas. It shares types with the plomos. The head of Apollo and the sacrificial bull's head. And here's the PS. Obviously, both objects were produced in the same Italic cultural milieu in the capital city, settled by Romans and Italians. As was suggested by Paz Garcia Bellido, I think PS stands for Publica Societas, an institution that managed agricultural production on the ager publicus that remained in the hands of the state or municipal authorities once public goods were sold to private persons after Sulla. These plomos probably date to the 80s, between the 80s and 49 BC, at which stage the optimates controlled this city. The obverse of 2, the reverse rather of 2, which is taken from the Athenian New Style tetradrachm, may relate to Sulla's victory over Mithridates Eupator of Pontus. But note these eulogistic types, which I think suggest this municipal control of the Publica Societas, celebrating 2 magistrates on the left and with the bull adorned for sacrifice on the right. Note the phonacator, this time unfortunately only with the floppy phallus. Minturnae after the Second Punic War. As we saw, Minturnae entered the 2nd century with a new supply of Roman bronze, but very few new coins then came to Minturnae rather, from Rome. These are obvious descendants of RRC 56M, probably made later as the coin stock wore down. This is a local quadrans on the characteristic triangular flan. And here we have a cut and counterpart marked part of an ass. One of these was given by Rick to the ANS. Here is a selection of local issues at Minturnae, some but not all of which use Italo-Betican types. Vulcan and the stridules and the ribalos. Some carry value marks as quadrantes and nuncii. And here, Ewan, you have your cornucopia coins. There's also a large group of quadrantes, which, judging from the left-facing prows, probably date to the 90s and the 80s. These have usually been classed as RRC 3394, and I suggest now listing them as RRC M RSC 339M4. There are a large number of lead pieces at Minturnae, some of which carry value marks. These include the strigils and erybolos carried by a dog, the bath attendant, and the phonacator. Some, like these, a type found in the Isola Pedrosa wreck and in Minturnae itself, date back to at least 140-130. This dilinked group is signed by members of the Furia, Baebia, Numicia, and Samiaria gentes, all of whom were active in the lead mining and trading between Cartagena, between the Cartagena-Mazarón area, Carthago Nuova, and Minturnae. They were probably made by Suquietas in Minturnae trading with that area. There's an overview of the evolution of the monetary stock at Minturnae from about 225 to the Principate, fading in and fading out and being replaced by other things. Pompei, unlike Minturnae, did not acquire new Roman coin during the Second Punic War. Neapolis had stopped coining in 225. Pompeii's coin stock wasted away while the economy grew strongly. The crisis for small change would have hit Pompei early. Pompei was probably one of the first places to react to the penury of small change by importing a large block of coins, probably some millions, from the Punic island of Ebusan, now Ibiza, probably about 150-140. These seem to have been taken from circulation. Most are group 18, with the god Bes on both faces, and there are some group 12 with Bes and a charging bull. These were the pieces which were copied by the Pseudomint, along with other, mixing these various types, when the block did not suffice. The types are Ebusan, that you see here, Massalia, and Rome, probably about 140, I think. Here are some of the most important of the prototypes. Even the obverse of the Roman gold piece, value mark and all, was copied in bronze. Here are a selection of the coins of the Pseudomint. Most common are these crude imitations of Ebusan coins with Bes on both faces. Second most common are issues imitating Massalia with anomalous legends. Most mixed types. These are Ebusan types. These are Massaliot, and these are Roman. A sign of the importance of the Pompeian wine trade with Massalia is the coins of the Pseudomint that have been found nearby at the Celtic oppidum of La Cloche, at Saint-Chamas, and at an uncertain place in the Rhone Valley. By comparing the Massaliot coins from Minturnae with those from Pompeii, it is clear that Pompeii's wine trade and its Pseudomint stopped completely with the conquest of Sulla. No further Massaliot coins came to Pompeii. I think Rome gave the trade to its faithful allies like Neapolis and Minturnae. There's a paper that will be in the next RIN in which I give all this information. This is a monetary history on two levels. At the more general level, the non-state coinages of Latium all respond to a single historical conjuncture, the crisis in the availability of small change that began in the middle of the 2nd century. Responses were all very local and involved many players about whom we know little. The use of the Italo-Vatican iconography, not only in Italy, but also on the plomas that are most likely to have been made by a Publica Societas at Cordoba in Spain, as well as the surprisingly numerous presence of the coins of the Pompeian Pseudomint in Massalia territory, link the local and peculiar phenomena back into the wider tissue of political and economic history of the Western Mediterranean at this crucial period of Rome's imperial expansion. The picture I present challenges a number of assumptions about Rome's presumed policies with its minor coinages and the coinages of its allies and colonies. The evolution of the coin stocks at Minturnae and Pompei shows that Republican Rome did not interest itself in or police its colonies or allies' minor coinages, nor supply them with small change. Legalistic concepts such as the right to coin do not seem applicable, with consequences for understanding the nature and practice of Roman expansion, nor does a preoccupation with weights seem to be very useful for token coinages, as I think Roman bronze was after the Second Punic War. We need to focus less on Rome as a state and more on central Italy and the Roman hegemony as a multifaceted phenomenon with a complex and shadowy cast of players. Amongst these, the most interesting is the enigmatic group responsible for the Italo-Vatican issues. The non-state coinages were not counterfeits. Moreover, no Republican legislation forbade or published the making of bronze coin. This is something I owe to Andrew McCabe, and it has been verified by Crawford. Rome did not strike sufficient small change for its own market after the mid-2nd century. This and the growing imbalance between the supply of bronze and silver coin was a major factor in the supply of in the crisis of small change, which opened the door to the non-state coinages. I know of nothing substantially similar in any of the other Hellenistic economies, though there is simple copying of circulating coins. For example, in Spain, as Peripao has shown, and as Sophia remarked yesterday, for Macedonia. Thanks for bearing with me.
That was wonderful. A real tour de force, and I cannot wait to read the print version. I will yield the floor first to Andrew McCabe for questions.
Hi, Liv, and hi, Clive. Great presentation. And I wanted to make three brief comments. First of all, the 56M series that you describe has its parallels in Sardinia and in Sicily, struck at the same weights. The coins are well known but confuse people because people don't know where they come from, and in my view you have to look at the understripes, otherwise you can't really tell them apart. The second thing is on the star quadrants that you mentioned. Yes, you are probably right that there may well have been an official mint. I wanted to clarify that we dated the original issue to 206 to 195, not the imitations. The imitations date, of course, later. But I wanted to mention two parallels. One is the C. Curiatius, C. Cur F series, which has two parallel issues, one with victory on the prow, and those without victory on the prow, Roberto Russo and myself determined were likely imitations. But now I'm wondering, are they just a later issue in the same way that the star ones are? Because the ones without victory in the prow are cruder in style and lighter in weight. But I also have recently discovered an entire new issue, which I believe was struck probably in northeast Italy, of asses only, which I will publish in due course, which copy a range of issues from the early 2nd century BC in fair style and weigh about 20 to 25 grams, and I think likely date from the late 2nd century BC and made in northeast Italy. And I'm wondering, also with semises and other coins, should we look to northeast Italy to some of these coins that you can't locate in Campania and I can't locate at Rome?
Thank you, Andrew. I agree with you. There's a lot to be done, but we need just to be careful and actually identify what really are imitations and know when and where they're made. I suggest that you and I try to do some work with Peripau, who has this very large group of imitations which he can't place in Spain. We have a look at these and see if we can't do something together with them. I spoke to Peripau about it, and he'd be interested in having a try. Let me make one remark about this 56M, which is, I think, interesting in terms of numismatic methodology. The reason that no one found this until I did was, firstly, that no one understood that Rome did not supply coin to Campania. So it was not until I was able to show that that Minturnae used Neapolitan coin that you could even begin to question this. But secondly, and this is very interesting, the fact that you had overstrikes over Rome, over Carthage, over Neapolis, and over Syracuse, led people to try and break it up according to where the overstrikes, the undertypes came from. It's very difficult when you've got an issue that's overstriking 4 different mints right across the world to realize that they're a unity. And that only came about when I had already shown that Minturnae did not use Roman bronze, but used Neapolitan bronze. And that was the key that led me into this. But I quite understand why people can't make that jump. The same is the problem with Crawford's work on the imitations. He saw this only as Rome and non-Rome. And until you actually get into the dyes of these ugly little things, you can't see that, in fact, Rome is only part of a bigger group. And then you realize that the imitations are not Roman, they're imitations of a number of things together. But thank you. I do think we should have a look, and Peripau would be very interested, I think, to work with us on this.
Wonderful. Oliver had a question, and then we'll go to Gilles.
Clive, it was fascinating as always. One thing I was interested in when you were showing your slides of the Spanish lead. I think maybe the first or second slide, you had a piece on there that looked like it was imitating the Athenian New Style owl reverse, and I was curious to know why we find that in Spain.
That in my opinion, and in the opinion of the people with whom I worked on this paper, which will be in the next Numismatic Chronicle, is that these are optimates, followers of Sulla, and it reflects the fact that Sulla had just had his big victory over Jupiter. So it's probably a boasting of Sulla's conquests in the East.
Okay.
That's why, having made that Sullan contact, I now think that I would be inclined to downdate the Panther to 82 BC, when Sulla comes back from the East and people come down to join him, like Pompey, for example, the boy butcher. And I think these may have been made to pay the Citarion for a particular army.
Okay. Thank you.
Gilles, would you like to unmute?
Yeah, sure. Yes, Clive, can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much as well. Absolutely fascinating. I know these slides went very fast, so I hope I understood them correctly. But what you're saying is that in Southeast Spain, some of the coins or lead seals show evidence for Societates Publicanorum, so what we call publican, in the management of local lands or mines in Southeast Spain. But what struck me is that, if I understood correctly, some of these coins show as well local magistrates. So are we dealing with, are we dealing with local publicans or some kind of overlap or cooperation between Roman publicans and local elites in the exploitation of local resources and agri publici?
This is a very good question, Gilles. As you know, until now, it's been thought, until very recently, it's been thought that the mines were actually worked by publicanorum, by the Societatis Publicanorum. The current thinking is that this is not correct. A book by Matteo shows, by reading Livy very carefully, that in fact the Societatis Publicanorum probably were only involved in the taxing of the mines. And the current thinking, and this is Domergue's thinking and the like, is that they were managed under the regime of occupatio. But I personally am a little worried by this. Throwing out the publicanorum means that we're not able anymore to think through the structures by which these huge mining societies worked. They work for many years, they overstruck coins, they make seals. That's actually that little seal that I showed. I found it on eBay in Italy. Like that.
Just to say that I have this seminar goes on until 2 o'clock, so I'm going to just sit here.
Clive, would you like to continue, or should I move on to Perry Power's comment?
Okay. Well, first of all, congratulations, Clive, for this interesting and wonderful presentation. And especially because these are very difficult materials and they are very hard to interpret because, as you know, almost all come from no context or not archaeological context. This is a very difficult question. I ask you to which extent the weight of the blocks that were shipped to Italy, the weight is a question, an important question to transport these coins. I mean,
the lead.
They come from Massalia, Ebusan, Sicily, all these, and all these coins are coins without weight, a reduced weight. It's probably there are no similar coins in, or not many similar coins in Roman coinages.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. Yeah.
And then I wonder if they import these coins by its weight and not imitate the Roman, because the Roman probably has another meaning in the area, I think. What do you think about?
Okay, the first question about transport is interesting. The best paper I know on coin transport is Johann van Hirsch, but he's talking about the late empire. And you find that coins were quite heavy and they tended to be carried on carts with a little box in the middle, big cart, small box. But in fact, the weight of these things is quite low, and you're only talking of a few tons of metal, even for a huge issue like the Panthers. So when you actually do the numbers, 1.5 million times, shall we say, an average of 3 grams, what would that be?
Yeah.
I can't it in my head, but it's not huge.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things is you find lead in the sea, and they were shipping the great ingots. We've never found any sign of and there's copper as well, and there's tin. But we've never found any sign of the silver in the seas. And the silver was very, very large, so it seems as if the silver went overland, because there's no sign of the silver actually being found in those shipwrecks. And we would have thought that they were there. And of course, we do have a lot of work on these shipwrecks now, and we know a lot about those promos. If anyone wants, by way, to have a preprint copy of this paper, which Alejandro and I and Bartolome and Jean-Luca prepared, just send me a note and I'll send it to you. It may interest you, Gilles, because of the questions you were asking. But that's the question of the transport. As for why one did or did not imitate Rome, I think Andrew McCabe and I have come to a conclusion that actually Rome was not particularly interested in the monetary rules of other people, was not imposing itself. So it doesn't seem to me that there was either a positive or a negative legal situation involved. So we have to look at it more in cultural terms. In Italy, it seems to me that you have strong local cultures that survive. And you have things happening which are not Rome. And that's why I say we need to look at the whole groups of people that are there. In your work on the imitative coins in Spain, we need to think of when and how those coins were used and who might have made them. But I doubt very much that the Romans were involved in any way. Yeah. That's my personal feeling. But I think both Andrew and I have that feeling. Let me sum it up. Rome was not interested in ramming its coinage down anyone's throat. People could make bronze coins and did, and we see no sign that weight was a particularly important thing. Rome evolved from a weight-based bronze coinage through the Second Punic War into a situation where people liked heavy coins because that was their tradition. But after that, the weights no longer, I think, make much sense, and I wouldn't regard it as a question of a bimetallic coinage.
Suzanne.
Yeah, I just jump in the similar reflections. You know, what is really interesting, it's how Rome acts or reacts. And as I have already pointed out in my paper, in the very first province, they react, but they still do something. And this is also interesting. And it's on the ancient territory of Carthage, not at all in eastern Sicily. And the cities come up only when Rome becomes a bit less interested and to do something. But then it's quite pragmatic. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight, maybe also then interesting, of course, what Sophia has shown, and then also the questors there. Again, they do something, and then even on silver, of course. But then the other interesting thing is Augustus. He introduces the quadrants. And this is, I think, an important change, because he does strike the small change. And then we see also how this spreads to some extent to Italy. We have many of them in the Liri. So these regions have now the quadrantes. And there are some signs that they turn up also in North Africa. I can show there are quite a lot up to Claudius, especially under Claudius in Carthage, and then even in the hinterland, in the inter countries of today's Algeria.
And they get sent to Nijmegen.
Yeah, Holland. It's yeah.
They get the army, we know that.
Yes, this is then just one, I think, provision, like yes, we can explain, but it's complex, but a very rich picture. And Clive's work is really, I would say, a big breakthrough in numismatics.
So we have 2 more questions, but I'm going to ask that we keep the answers short so we can have some closing remarks and end on time. Kenneth, would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
I was just noting that Crawford in footnote, I think it's footnote 310 on like page 566, talks about some of the imitative quadrantes, what he calls imitative or unofficial, things like they have symbols like pennants on flying from the prow, or the letters N or M or other letters or other control marks. How do they fit into the crisis of small change? Do we think these were minted in the south of Italy or in the center of Italy, or what?
Thanks, Kenneth. In the paper, I remark on this. I have seen a number of these in chasing the blocks of coins to create the Liri database that came from the river at Minturnae. I'm certain of that. I'm inclined to think that many of these are also part of the Minturnae strikes in the 1st century BC.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
So Clive, just following up exactly on the same question, because I was about to ask you how you place then exactly all the imitations of Roman coinage that are catalogued in Crawford 1982. Of course, some of them are Spanish, and of course Villaronga, Tortabarit, now of course Perepau, and Gonzalez and Rick did a lot. But so you are envisioning then in Minturnae or in Latium something like, so there were some imitations which were like pseudopanormus, so exactly all these pseudomins. Then there was this Italo-Bedding assemblage, and on top of that there were also all these imitations of Roman coinage.
Yes, I think I wouldn't even call them imitations of Roman coinage. After all, Minturnae is in fact a Roman colony.
Yes.
But I think what I've done in the last few years, particularly with the studies of trade with Spain, I've lifted Minturnae from an obscure place to being a really important player. And Alejandro and I think it was probably one of the very first cities to penetrate Spain. It was very important in the 2nd and 1st century BC. And I think many of those coins, when we can riddle them out, stylistically are the same as what I call 339M. And I think it's highly likely that they're made in Minturnae. I should also note that I don't know any other mint doing this. So it's not that I can say, oh, well, they could be from. I think they're from Minturnae.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I ask something to Clive?
Yes.
I totally agree with Clive, and I thank him so much for this presentation. And I think that Clive agrees if I say that imitating a type of a coin means that you recognize it, you choose to make an imitation, right? But
then why should a Roman imitate Menaion? You see, I think or Panorma or Termessos in Psidian, there is no reason for it. I think, in fact, that there was such a mess in the currency at the time that people were using foreign coins, and they went, oh, one of these, pop, pop, and just copied it. I think we have to allow for the sod factor. Not everything in the ancient world was rational. Not everything in the ancient world follows a preconceived rational plan. The sod factor comes in all the time.
Yes, I agree. And I would also add, talking again about Velia, we were talking about Velia before, that, for example, Velia is a strange case where a city that's already a Roman municipium strike coins with a Greek legend. So it's quite strange. So it's like the tradition is stronger than law, or tradition is stronger than the other models that of Rome. It's so impressive. So it's true. If
I could make one last comment, and this is for you, Gilles. I think as as someone who's interested in economic history, someone should really look at what the structure of the societatis that are mining the mining area might be. Because when we throw out the publiconorum, the societatis publiconorum, we have no clear information on which we can understand this very large economic event. It's well worth a thing. I was thinking of talking to Keith Verboven about it, but I got a note back saying that he's ill. I hope he doesn't have COVID.
Wonderful. One last, very last, no more questions, but I'm going to let Seth ask a final question before we move on to the closing remarks.
Thank you, Liv. I wasn't expecting to talk. Sorry. This is a wonderful talk. I'm just typically thinking about the earlier period, and your dismissal of this coinage as imitative, and your idea that this is something different, that this pseudomint activity is different. It does bring to my mind, at least, what is happening in pre-Denarius Italy with the very local production. That we see all sorts of differences. The iconography is obviously very different. The striking centers are very different, but the sort of locally based, locally circulating coinages here look very similar to what you see in the 3rd century. And I'm just struck by this idea that the sort of the backbone of Italian coinage production may in fact be much more durable over the long run than we'd thought, and than we tend to think, thinking about what the Second Punic War does to Italy's coinage. So it's more of a comment, but anyway, I very much enjoyed the talk. Thank you.
Final remark. Anyone who wants, send me an email and I'll send them 3 papers. The one showing that Rome and, the one on the mines, the one on coinage in Campania, which goes into very questions, and also probably the one from Rin, which is in Italian, showing that Pompei has no contact with Massilia after the social war. But I'll gladly put those up and let anyone who wants them have a look at them.
Wonderfully generous. My mind is full of a new landscape that decentralizes Rome and brings to light the wide and rich and diverse numismatic traditions of the period.
Thank you for watching the American Numismatic Society's YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like our online resources, publication, and events, you can support the Society by becoming a member. And don't forget to check out our book and eBay stores. The links are below.